Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barakat. I am one of the member of Group A3, and I have my co-team here with me, Rukayat and Pricinat. And today we'll be presenting on the impact on colonial policy on mental health in indigenous community in Canada. So our presentation will explore how colonial system like the India Arts, residential school, the reserve system as as shaping indigenous mental health outcome both historically and today. Yeah, and then on the background slide in it begins colonial policy in Canada created long-term structure that deeply affects indigenous identity, culture, and well-being. The Indian Act restricted indigenous autonomy, outlawed cultural practices, and imposed government control. The residential school system forcibly removed children from their families, aiming to erase indigenous identity. The reserve system displaced community from their ancestral land, resulting in the loss of culture, resources, and community cohesion. These policies disrupted families, parenting rules, language, relationship, and overall mental and emotional well-being. And here, my other co-team will take from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Barakat, for explaining the historical foundation of colonial policies and how they disrupted indigenous communities. Building on that, I will be focusing on the ongoing mental health impacts that indigenous people continue to experience today. And then I'll share what research tells us about the intergenerational effects of residential schools. Even though many of these policies were created decades or even centuries ago, their impact did not simply end when the law changed. The emotional and cultural and psychological damage continues to influence indigenous people and their families today, and that long-lasting impact is what we'll look at next. Now we are going to talk about the ongoing mental health impacts. Research make it very clear that colonization created trauma that is still felt in the present. One major concept is intergenerational trauma. This means the trauma experienced by parents and grandparents get passed down through behaviors, family structures, and emotional patterns, even if the younger generation never experienced the original event. As a result, many indigenous communities experience significant higher rates of depression, often connected to culture loss, discrimination, and the emotional scar of history. There are also higher rates of PTSD linked not only to personal trauma but to inherited trauma from family members who survived residential schools or other colonial policies. In many regions, suicide rates are higher among indigenous youth, and research shows strong connections to loss of land, loss of identity, and loss of culture safe mental health services. This pattern shows that colonization is not something of the past, its effects continue to shape mental health today. Now we are going to talk about the research finding of residential schools. When we look specifically at residential school research, the impact become even more clear. Now we are going to talk about survivors commonly report lifelong emotional distress, anxiety, and difficulty with trust and attachment. Children or survivors face greater risk of mental health struggles because many survivors did not grow up with nurturing family environments, not by choice but because residential schools prevented them from experiencing healthy parenting. Even grandchildren of survivors show higher risk of trauma. substance use, and emotional difficulties. This shows that trauma can be transmitted through generations, not biologically, but through disrupted relationships, emotional pattern, and a loss of cultural grounding. So, when we talk about the indigenous mental health today, it is important to understand that these challenges are not disconnected from history. They are deeply rooted into the system and structures created by during colonization. Now, my another co-member will take from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Parasnate. And I will be talking about land, identity, wellness, and wellness connections. Another important theme in the research is the connection between indigenous mental health and their land. Land is not only a physical space, it is tied to identity, culture, healing, and community wellness. Colonial displacement disrupted these relationships, contributing to emotional and spiritual harm. Loss of land has meant loss of traditional ways of life, ceremonies, and community rules, all of which protect mental health. Reconnecting with land is therefore essential for healing. Next, I'll be talking about the conclusion and recommendations. In conclusion, colonial policies have had deep and lasting effects on indigenous mental health. The impacts are not only historical, they continue to shape families and communities today. Based on the research, we recommend the following. Firstly, strengthen indigenous-led mental health programs to support culturally grounded healing. Secondly, expand land-based healing initiatives that reconnect individuals with identity and culture. Thirdly, improve cultural safety in mainstream healthcare so indigenous people can access services without discrimination. And lastly, support trauma-informed policies that acknowledge and address the legacy of colonization. Together, these steps can help promote healing and restore wellness in indigenous communities.
Hi guys. Hi again guys. All references used in this presentation is stated in this slide. As we all conclude, it is important to remember that the impacts are not abstract. They affect real people, families, community. They happen in real life every day. Healing is happening and it requires recognition of the past, of the commitment to supporting indigenous voices and leadership moving forward. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Our research makes one thing clear: healing from colonial trauma requires action. Supporting indigenous led programs, creating culturally safe environments, and acknowledging historical harms are all steps we can take to promote mental wellness. We encourage everyone here to continue learning, listening, and supporting indigenous communities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank
Thank
you
you all
all
for
for
listening to our
listening.
presentation. We
We
all
are
are the
the
Group A3
A3.
group. Thank
Thank
you.
you.